What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now today's going to be a relatively quick episode, and for those of you with a power steering pump that's making a whine sound either at idle or full lock left and right positions, there's a very easy fix in order to get that power steering pump sound like normal. Parts are less than 10 bucks and only takes about 10 or 15 minutes. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, guys, this is going to be a relatively quick and simple video. I've been doing some work on my power steering system here. As you can see, I've got an H22 swap on my CB9 wagon. The situation I've got here is the power steering pump. It's making a little bit of whining sound at idle, and also when I steer the wheels left and right. Now, when I remove this reservoir cap here, the power steering fluid actually had some frothing on top of it, which led me to believe that there was a leak in the air system. I spoke with some Honda mechanics online, and they believe that there's air getting sucked into the system, and that's the culprit. So whenever I went ahead and did the bleeding of this rack and pinion and power steering system, there was no noise whatsoever. I went for a 3-mile drive, came back, it was fine. Went for a drive the next day, the morning it was fine, and then I went for like a 6-mile drive, and I came back and the power steering pump was making the same noise. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to quiet down your power steering pump, especially if it relates to an H22, because I believe this power steering pump is specific, but this theory also works for many Honda Acura models. So let me show you what's going on. Now, I just got back from the Honda dealer, and there's only going to be 3 parts you'll need for this. Honda OEM power steering fluid, this O-ring right here, and this O-ring right here. This O-ring is for the return side of the reservoir going into the power steering pump, and this ring right here goes on the power steering pump head back into the rack and pinion system. For whatever reason, there's no part number on here, but I'll leave that in the description. So you've got a black one here that leads back to the rack and pinion, and the orange one, which is a supply line from the reservoir. All right, some of the tools you'll need is a 10mm ratchet or a 10mm wrench, a small little pick or flathead screwdriver, a rag, jack stands. You want to have the front wheels off the ground for this procedure during the bleeding process. Okay, let's go over the power steering pump components here. So this is the main head that leads back into the rack and pinion system. And this port right here leads from the supply system back into the reservoir. So we're going to go ahead and do the worst one first, which is the supply. So we need to put a rag down here in case any fluid drips down. That's basically going to be the hardest part. And then we'll undo this 10mm right here, and there should be an O-ring on this little outlet right here. So let's go ahead and take that apart and get access to the O-ring. Alright, went ahead and got the old O-ring off, and as you can see here, it looks like there's actually a little cut or a slit in this O-ring, and it was real easy to pull that fitting out. So we're going to go ahead and replace this old O-ring with our new orange one that we picked up from the dealership. So before putting this thing back together, just put a little bit of power steering fluid on your finger and just kind of rub this ring. That way it kind of seats perfectly when it goes back together. And we'll go ahead and reinstall this thing in the reverse order. Alrighty, this inlet O-ring has now been replaced. I went ahead and put some fluid on the O-ring, slid in position, carefully put this fitting back into the power steering pump. Now when I put this back into the power steering pump, this was a lot tighter than it was pulling it out, so this may be the culprit, but we're going to replace both O-rings anyways. So I went ahead and put this 10mm back in position, torqued it down to 8 foot-pounds. So now we can go ahead and address this head right here, which leads to the rack and pinion. Let's remove these 2 10mm bolts right here, and we'll see what we're working with. went ahead and got this head off the power steering pump, and in this channel right here, that's where the O-ring rests. Now I just took my small flathead screwdriver and then just kind of popped it out in position. Let me go ahead and show you what's going on with O-rings. Now here's the O-ring I removed, and this is a Honda OEM O-ring. I don't know if you can see the differences, but this looks to be a little bit of smaller diameter and slightly thicker. Now, from my understanding is these two O-rings came with the rebuilt power steering pump. So do yourself a favor, if you buy a rebuilt power steering pump and they come with O-rings, just go ahead and toss them in the trash and pick up OEM O-rings. So let's go ahead and take this out of the package, put a little bit of power steering fluid on here, slip it back onto the head, and then reattach it to the power steering pump. So let's go ahead and take care of that. Okay, we got both O-rings replaced on the supply side and the rack side. So the next step is we're gonna go inside the car, steer the steering wheel full left and right a few times while it's up on the jack stands. And what that's gonna do is gonna basically take the air out of the system. So let's go ahead and take care of that. Okay, now that we steered the steering wheel full left and right a few times while it's up in the air, next step is I've got the cap off the reservoir, obviously. We're gonna go ahead and start the car, and we're gonna see what the pump sounds like. So let's go ahead and take care of that. And while it's up in the air, I'm gonna steer the wheels a few times left and a few right while the car's running. So let's see what this pump does. Okay, just got back from an 8-mile round trip. Popped the hood. Power steering pump does not have a whine to it, which is phenomenal. Now the true test is in this reservoir. See if it's got prod liquid. That liquid is smooth as glass. I believe we are good to go. So the O-rings were just replaced. That's preventing any air from going in the system. A part so small, yet has a big effect to the entire system. I am very, very happy, guys. We finally have power steering, knock on wood. Alrighty, not sure if you noticed, but when we started the car after the O-ring replacement, the whine sound was still evident. But after a few seconds, that sound dissipated and now sounds like a normal power steering pump. Who would have thought that two small O-rings could make such a big difference? Long story short was that air was getting sucked into the system from deteriorated or bad fitting aftermarket O-rings. And this is basically a 10-minute job and only requires a 10mm wrench, torque wrench, and a small flathead screwdriver. Anyhow, this power steering whine noise was an easy fix with the O-ring replacement on the power steering pump, and should work on other Hondas, Acuras, and many other models. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. For channel updates, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Have a great day.